first mail. Did it go?
Yes.
And
I did
I
get
just wanted to explain, because I get it, you know. It seemed a little concerned that we had, edited the letter, but I thought it was important. We've had like 3 meetings with him now, and every meeting he has clearly said that DOT is responsible, but we don't like have it in writing, so I really wanted to get that in the letter.
I got a response from him.
Oh, you did?
Yeah, so was it yesterday you came in?
Yeah.
Yeah, so yesterday, we
Great.
signed it, I emailed it to him and then sent it in the mail, and then what I was gonna share with you guys for communications. Got a response from him, basically apologizing,
Yeah.
because he thought it had been passed on
I know.
and people were gonna be in touch, and so he was gonna let people know.
But I think we asked for a meeting, right? Did he say anything about that?
That is, all right, so that's good.
Done in budget guy, yeah. All right, we're gonna go ahead and open up this, continue our meeting, but we are opening up the budget workshop part of the meeting at this point in time. And we are looking at, I believe, a budget draft titled Budget Second Draft 3/6/2024. That's the right thing, yep, okay. So this budget looks at the changes that we suggested at our last budget meeting. And if you skip down to the sort of bottom line,
Where are
right
you,
before revenues. So at the end of capital improvements,
Page 35.
yeah, tell me the page, that would be.
yeah, I'm looking at a spreadsheet, so I don't have the pages, sadly. Oh, no, I do, I'm sorry, right there it is. At the end of page 35. Yep.
What are you on for bottom line already?
Well, I just want to let you know where it gets to with the changes that we made at our last meeting. So that without changing property tax, without changing the assumption that our undesignated fund balance contribution would be the same as last year, keeping those two things flat and knowing that the school budget is not input in here yet, so it's the same as last year. So we went from budget two, budget one being a 1.33% increase to this budget being a 4.67% increase. And
Do we have any copies? I'm just looking at John, there's
I went
no,
online and tried to find it, and I only found draft 2,
yeah,
which showed a 1.33%. But
I should have printed, I mean,
what we got percentage for?
well, it's on the report, it's 4.67.
it's on page 35.
It's on page 35 of the
Oh,
report. Yeah, yeah. What I then did was played around with changing some of those numbers that I just referred to. For example, if we increased the use of undesignated funds, or for example, if we increased fees, and what kind of numbers does that come up with? So maybe you have a preliminary number at this point for
Say, oh,
Yeah.
our opportunity for undesignated funds. And remember that undesignated funds is to be used by both the town side of things and the school side of things. So the total opportunity for undesignated funds, according to the formula from the state, the maximum we could take out was 270, is that correct?
So based on the draft right now, what the last number that I looked at, so according to the policy that the town has, it has to be greater than 16%, but less than 25.
right,
So fiscal year 2023, it ends up being on page 18 of the draft audit statement. The undesignated fund was at 24.78. Is the number that I came up with. So 16% of that would be $366,000. 25% of that would be 643. The fiscal year 23 undesignated fund was 638, which is why roughly you're looking at $270,000 of available undesignated funds. The one thing to keep that in mind is if you use the maximum allowance, so then you're at, having the minimum. If halfway through the year, you need to go to town meeting, there are no undesignated funds to use because you'll be at the minimum. There was a special vote last year at the town meeting to appropriate up to $10,000 for legal fees. The town ended up, instead of appropriated the full $10,000. What I did is I just, journal entered exactly what was needed. So it ended up being a couple $1,000s. I just haven't had a chance to look back and see exactly what that was. But that was kind of my first, take at these numbers, which is why last year the $200,000 was in it. And so I just left it there for now. So there was something to work in there. The school, last year, there was $20,000 in it. And so we don't know if they're gonna be looking for any funds to use.
So just clarify for me, because maybe I'm confused. Does the town, I'm not talking about the audit, but just in general, doesn't the town maintain their undesignated funds separately from the school,
Yes.
right?
So where would the undesignated fund balance from the school come from?
They keep, I mean, in their accounting, they maintain their own undesignated fund. I don't, and so I think so they might be combined audit wise. But I believe, having been on the school board and done a zillion budgets, we had our own undesignated fund that we tracked and would occasionally apply to the budget. Actually, we applied it every year, but that was independent of the town's application from their undesignated fund. And we kept a balance that was specific and related only to, so if there were school, if at the end of the year we had $200,000 left over, it went to the school undesignated fund, not to the town undesignated. Correct?
And I believe that you're correct. I think what you said is the key. I think the audit might combine everything, but as far as budgeting and accounting, state reporting wise, the school has to be separate from.
Correct, but my understanding is, and I'm more than happy to check, just looking back at the last couple of years, when the school says we want to use $100,000, this, final $600,000 number, the X amount of dollars from that comes for the town, and then the X amount of dollars
Right.
from the schools. You just separate how it's shown, yes.
Right, but I think that in terms of sort of evaluating the percentages, it's on the town side. It's always the way I've understood it, because the school has their own criteria, which is different in terms of what their undesignated, it's actually lower. They have a maximum they're supposed to not exceed in the undesignated fund, and we used to exceed it occasionally, but so how you figure out the percentage relates to your, the town or school specific undesignated fund. And the other thing on the policy on the ratio or whatever it is, that percentage in the undesignated fund is something that changed fairly recently.
Yeah.
But I just want to say, it is a policy, so it's not like we couldn't go to town meeting and spend more money. It's not prohibited. It's just a policy.
It's not an ordinance. it's a
Right,
policy.
so it's just, just to be clear, I
But
think, it's-
overriding that, there's also a state
right,
policy, which we do need to follow, and that state policy is far more liberal in its
Right.
spending of money than our internal town should be policy. Am I reading that correctly?
I would have to double check. I don't know the number off the top of my head. So
It's
I don't wanna
pretty
do
good.
that.
Pretty good, yeah, they encourage, according to Herb, in a conversation when I had,
Yeah.
the state kind of encourages you to go further than our
comfort level.
our comfort level, our more conservative approach. So we go back to the number. So as of the audit, which is still in draft form, correct?
Yes, today the finalized draft was sent and I uploaded that into OneDrive. So I just,
Oh, that's the one that's on the OneDrive?
yeah.
It's final?
Excellent.
It's
No,
the
it's a-
final draft. And so it's a final draft.
It's close.
What happens to turn it into a final document?
What I need to do is I just need to kind of skim through the overall thing and make sure that exactly, and then sign the front page, send it, and then I think they just take the watermark off of it
Okay,
at
so
that point.
according to that draft that you just uploaded, what is the 25% of the undesignated fund balance and what is the 15%?
So according to that, 16% is $366,000
Okay,
and 25% is 643.
okay, so bigger than what we've been talking about.
And so the fiscal year was 638. So, fiscal year 23, according to the draft, the undesignated fund balance for the combined, school and town was 638,000.
Right, but what I was trying to say, maybe I was clear, is that the town percentage applies to the town
Right.
for part of the undesignated fund, so we need to know what our portion is. And it would be 15 to 25% of
Oh, that
that.
one. But
Not over.
how does that decision get made?
That was what decision.
The apportionment to
We're
town?
supposed to be tracking that, at least the school. And I believe.
Oh, I see. It's the undesignated funds from our budget from last year. So the audit is looking at the undesignated funds from last year's budget for the school combined with the
Correct.
undesignated.
But
So,
they also, in the audit, so you can find it in the audit, I haven't looked at it, but I just got.
I haven't,
So there, it's accounted for in the audit, but for example, typically, I mean, if you look in the school budget, perhaps if they have it, but there was a balance of like, say it's $200,000, and then they may have had some money left over. They were, the audit sort of, basically what it does is reconcile kind of, the leftover money. And if it isn't used some other way, then it goes into the undesignated.
last year, the school used $20,000 because they knew that, that budget that they had that year, they didn't have a lot to work with.
Right, and you might use 20,000 from your undesignated fund. And could potentially have more going in at the audit stage, you know what I mean?
yes,
Does that make
So-
sense?
I think it does. The school, so when you say 23 had X dollars, that's from the audit of 23.
Correct.
And that's the total for the school and the town.
That's my understanding.
And that number again is what?
640.
Okay,
It's 638,165.
so the number that we're working with for the town's use
Yeah,
is a portion of that.
yeah,
And it's either 15% of a portion of that, or it's 25%.
So according to the policy, it needs to be greater than 16%, but less than 25%.
I'll see if I can find it.
Okay. And then earlier, I thought I heard a number of 643,000.
So, I mean, the 643,000 was the maximum 25% of, the total.
Yeah, but I don't think that's how we apply it. I think we apply it to the town portion.
We do, we only apply it to the town portion. So could I say something?
Sure.
So I think, in my opinion, the intention of that, keeping no less than 16% of the municipal operating budget in the undesignated fund and no more than 25% was keeping 16% in there would possibly get us out of a situation if we had a big expense that we didn't want to go back to town meeting and ask to borrow money to replace, like some big piece of equipment or something like that. Going over 25% and keeping it in the undesignated fund balance, to us, felt like we were overtaxing the
Right.
citizens.
Right, that's the cost.
Yeah.
That's the cost.
So for tonight's discussion, if we start with the fact that our current changes leave us at a 4.67% increase. There are a couple of points to take a look at. If you come down to revenues on page 36, I believe it is. And if you look at tax commitment, the budget for the 2024 fiscal year was $3,225,000. The actual year to date is $3,265,000. So the actual is already 40,000 up.
That's not gonna stay where it is.
Can I make a comment to
Sure.
that? So this number is calculated, it is. This particular number comes up with, and I have, of course, I don't have it in front of me, but it's, when the taxes are, the anticipated commitments, so last year when you were talking about mill rate and those numbers. What you're doing is you're basically taking, the overall budget and you're subtracting specific revenues. Or contingency, or there are specific things that have to be subtracted from that. Once those are subtracted, the number that you're left with is what you're saying you are going to anticipate raising by taxes. And so that number, that's how that number gets put in there.
The 3,264,000.
Yeah, so you would take, and I should have brought it with me, I have it in last year's, you would take what your, basically what you would take is, you would take your initial expense number.
Yep.
You would subtract contingency, you would subtract special ed, reimbursement from the state, you would subtract, exemption, there are specific things that have to be subtracted from that. And then you're left with the number, and that's the number that you're anticipating is gonna be raised by taxes.
So that 2024 year-to-date tax number is not an actual year-to-date collection?
Correct. Right. That year-to-date number, is
Is the
there because it gets placed in there, and then, it's there essentially for the year, and then when we close out at the end of the year is when we really know what the amount was raised in taxes.
Okay.
Bob,
That's why we do the audit.
I actually misspoke. What I meant to say was the overall value of the town won't stay where it is.
Correct.
Currently.
Well, that's where I was coming from.
Yeah.
Yeah. So with that number being a plug that doesn't get trued up till the end of the fiscal year, does that say anything different about what we should have in the 2025 initial budget? Right now, we've got the same number for 2025 initial as we had in 2020.
I think the numbers are on.
So that number is going to change, but that's gonna be one of the last things to change, because you really have to buckle down your budget to really know what your expense is gonna be. And then we are gonna have to know, what, like homestead reimbursement is gonna be from the state. We're gonna have to know what the state revenue sharing. So those numbers are gonna keep coming in. That's why, the revenue is, in the couple of years I've done it and then haven't spoken to Marjorie, it's closer to like March, April that you really start plugging the revenue numbers in, because you don't know that information until later on.
Okay. All
Well,
right.
we
If
do
that
have,
makes sense.
we do have the state valuation numbers, they came out in January.
So where I was headed was when we got through the first review of the budget, we went from a 1.33% increase in expenses to a 4.67% increase in expenses. That's without doing anything with revenues. And I was wondering if tonight we could begin talking about revenues. Sounds like maybe it's premature, but to begin talking about revenues to help get us to, let's just say artificially that we want to have taxes increase no more than 4%. And I'm making that number up. I'm not committing to it. I'm just making it up. What changes do we need to make to get to that number? Do we need to decrease capital? Or if our tax commitment is gonna go higher, or if our undesignated fund balance utilized in this budget is gonna go higher, then that gives us the increase, that gives us the ability to increase some of our capital expenditures in areas like Stone Pier, like public safety building, to begin building up those funds for what we know is coming. So if, where I'm coming from is if we pick a number and say we want the taxes to go up no more than this, how can we get at that number? How can we get at all the things we can do to come close to that number at this point in time? Sounds like we can't until we get more
Well,
information on the revenue.
And also no school budget. I mean, I don't think it's even worth the effort till we have a draft school
Right.
budget because it's such a large percentage. of
Yeah, and
our
I
town
don't,
budget.
I have no
Right.
idea whether they're
I think they
anticipating
don't know.
increase or I have no idea.
Yeah,
Right,
yeah.
so I don't think that's a
Okay.
worthwhile, I think that's a late in the game exercise that we should do. We did it last year.
Yep.
And I think it's worth doing, and we can kind of, what Marjorie used to do is actually, I think it was Marjorie, set up the, the sheet, like David did the very first year we became a town.
Just the
So,
tax mill rate
Right. We know the state equalized valuation, and so I think we can.
Yeah,
get all
Jackie
prepared.
helped me get that done.
Yeah.
But that was like
But that's late.
end of March,
Right.
April,
Yeah.
that was really creeping into May that,
Right. So
that
the,
was being done.
so the other topic, given that we can't work on that tonight, the other topic that I thought might be worth exploring is fees. And I don't think we're ready to do that tonight, but I think we do need to take a look at our fees relative to what we're spending compared to some of the fees that we're charging, and look at the fees relative to other towns that surround us. So for example, construction waste. How much does Yarmouth charge for a pickup load of construction waste? Or the same question on construction waste. How much does it cost us, including the tipping fee plus the barging? How much does it cost us and how much are we charging? And I don't know the answer to the question. My sense is that from prior conversations, is we're not charging what we're paying out.
Right, and Vika's memo said that, right, in solid waste, so that
Yeah.
we're charging $20 for a mattress, we're paying what, 40 to 50?
We're paying
That's
45 to 50 and that doesn't include the bar.
Margin, so I do think, I guess I think this would be a conversation, maybe in coordination with.
If I could jump in here for a second, miscellaneous revenue, that's $30,000 that hasn't really been recognized yet. $30,000 in 2023 actual compared to nothing in the current budget. So that, I'm not sure how we get to that number either.
And what is that
That,
number?
so with the miscellaneous revenue, that most likely is something that was posted there and, was, needed to be journal entered out. So miscellaneous revenue does not get budgeted because you can't anticipate what you're gonna receive for miscellaneous revenue. We really use it as kind of a siphon account most of the time. If we get a check that needs to be transferred into something else, but that is most likely just an error for not having a journal entry be done.
So, Vika, where do the grant funding, where does that show up in the revenue side?
It doesn't.
It doesn't.
No.
So basically, it just cuts back the expense side. In other words, if you have a project that's 100,000, you get a grant for 50, what shows up is the expense for the $50,000.
Yeah, so with that $75,000, yeah, so essentially the town will be paying $50,000 for 70,
Yeah.
but that doesn't get washed in, that doesn't get shown up in revenue. We have general ledger accounts that are set up for each one of those. So with the 5 or 6 different grants we have now, we have general ledger set up for them. And so as the money is received, it goes through cash and then it gets debited into that. And then that's the account that kind of keeps it track of it.
And to answer where I do think we should address and I don't know how much extra revenue it would generate, but I do think our solid waste fees are too low. And, I think Vika pointed out, we're paying just the actual charge. We're charging less than what we're paying for just the weight, the mattress. Plus, I do think we should consider, we have enough information, we could calculate some number that relates to transport off the island. And so I think that's been an area in our expense, that's the most expensive department maybe, right?
It is now the most expensive one, I believe, so yes.
So, and, even exploring, like requiring, like I think we've discussed, contractors, someone having a project of a certain size needs to get their own dumpster. I think that's worth exploring. A lot of communities have, pay per bag. The incentive there is that, people, right now, there's no incentive for people to reduce the amount of stuff that is disposed. Because it doesn't cost them anything. And then the other side, that's not a small cost, is, the wood dump is $25,000 a year. And we don't charge people anything, including commercial contractors, to dump stuff there. So I think
And
maybe.
that's the cost without having Public Works' salary for two
Okay.
guys.
Right, so I mean, and maybe we should think about commercial charges for that, at least, I can see. But the other part of that is you have to manage it that way then, so that you capture, you can't leave it open on the weekends so that people can come whenever they want.
And those are great conversations that I've had with Jeff.
Yeah.
Knowing that it's probably not something that could be instated or discussed in time for next budget, but definitely an interest in future discussions that I think are possible.
I think we could raise our solid waste disposal, just the stuff we take in, salt, whatever you guys, whatever it's called, mattresses and things. I think we could make that change, and that's not a big revenue generator, but it's kind of setting the stage for what.
The biggest volume is gonna be construction waste going into the hopper.
Right, and I personally, I will require, and maybe I'm talking out of turn, I shouldn't agree with me, I'm not sure what the
Or
point
that's
is.
in the for one.
Go ahead.
Well, it's okay. I don't disagree with anything you're saying. I'm not sure the adjustments of any rates are going to be made in time to help us finalize this proposed budget for next year. I'm not being pessimistic, I'm just being a realist. I think probably the best way to handle these type of discussions about the transfer station is to have a full-blown workshop
Yeah, and we
with
can
the
talk.
two
Yep.
existing employees coming and participating, and anyone in the public, including contractors or heavy users that may be affected. And I think we're going to have to, as a community and a town, get a little tougher with our prices and policies of what we accept up there.
Yep.
I think that's the realism. The wood dump, I don't have an answer for.
I know.
The fiasco at the moment.
So I have a couple of thoughts. One, on a couple of things Carol mentioned, I think we have to be very careful of unintended consequences. Just as an example that's come up in other towns. One thing that can happen when you go to a per bag fee, typically people charge for the bag of garbage, but they don't charge for the recycling. People then begin wish cycling. People begin throwing stuff into the recycling that should be going into the garbage and trying to get away with that as a way to keep their bag fees down. So, people.
I'm not suggesting we go for pay for bag.
I understand.
I think right
Let me
now,
finish, please. Let me finish. I'll say it again, I'm a broken record on it. I'm against requiring contractors to have roll-offs because the town loses control of any vestige of recycling. And in my experience, when there's a roll-off on site, a whole lot of stuff goes into the roll-off that could have been recycled. And I think it's a moral imperative on us to do what we can to encourage recycling. I think another answer to that is simply to charge more at the transfer station per pickup load. Because when you're paying per pickup load, you're not gonna put stuff in that hopper that should be recycled. And if you're paying twice as much, you're gonna be even more diligent about making sure your subs and your employees aren't putting pop bottles and cardboard into the pickup truck that's going to the transfer station. So just, there's a lot of work to be done there. I do think, Mark, we could tackle some of the fees, some of the bigger items. Remember, those are policies. That's a select board decision. We could decide at a business meeting sometime in March to have on the agenda to review the fees, and we could change the fee for the pickup load of dumps or construction waste, or we could change the fee for mattresses or change the fee for tires or refrigerators to match more closely what it is we're paying out. And we could work that into this year's budget, especially given that we'll be dealing with the expenses later on in March in the budget.
You're right, you can do that at any time. I think that would be, so for how the anticipated revenues kind of have historically been calculated, and how I was taught is you basically take the average of the last 3 years, and if you're anticipating any increase, you know, you add a little bit.
Yeah.
And so with the transfer station, you know, looking at the number that's currently, you would add, I would add it, you know, bring it up from 26,000 to 28,000. And so if you increase it, you know, maybe bump it up to 30, but it would be hard to estimate until you kind of go through a year and have a better idea. Because what you're also doing is these revenues, you know, other revenues such as transfer station fees, things like that. If you don't collect what you anticipate, then you're potentially setting yourself up. So that's why there is such heavy dependency on the tax commitment, because you essentially know that you're most likely going to collect that money.
Could I make a general quick statement? So right now, we're $179,177 over last year.
Yep. You're saying budget versus last year's budget?
Right now.
Yep, yep,
As of tonight.
yep.
I'm not saying that will stay the same. I'm not saying it won't decrease or increase. I'm suspecting that we could go through the operational budget and really not make much of a dent at all as far as decreases. We might be able to find a little wiggle room. As far as the capital improvement plan, that's where the rubber hits the road, in my opinion. And right now, we're proposing $200,000 for Stone Moore. Why are we proposing $200,000 for Stone Moore? Because we want to have $500,000 in there if the voters approve it. And at some point, we're going to probably go after a DOT grant to try to do something with that wharf, and we're going to want to show DOT and the world that we're serving both the project. Are we gonna go down through this capital improvement list and cut things out? Possibly, but you know, planning to replace the final fire engine, planning for barge ramps, planning for ramps and floats, planning for I guess reevaluation, we've already got that money. Planning for stuff financially is not a terrible move. It's a good move. As long as you're not planning for something at $10,000, it's gonna cost you $20 million. That's not reachable. My point is, I'm not sure we're gonna be whittling this capital improvement plan down much. So last year, we asked the voters for $200,000 of the undesignated fund balance. Do we have any idea when we'll have a guess at what will be the undesignated fund balance? Maybe a month or so, or?
This revenue is with anticipated, $200,000 undesignated fund.
So you've got that already in.
Under the revenue, I have $200,000.
And that's so the 4.6% that we are at includes the $200,000. Oh, I didn't realize that.
Yeah.
Okay, so my point to my ramble, Bob, is I'm not going to be uncomfortable asking for another shot of money out of the undated fund balance to the voters, as long as we show them an operational budget that makes sense, and a capital improvement budget, no offense to the operational budget, but a capital improvement budget, more importantly, that is planning for some future.
Yeah.
It's very important.
Yeah, David.
Mark is absolutely right, and actually, this town is kind of unusual in having a capital improvements, lineup. A lot of towns, that's the first place it gets cut. A lot of towns, they don't even have, such an account to begin with. And I think it's critical that we keep our eye on that ball, to do the capital improvements and budget for them in advance rather than all of a sudden come up and, hit the voters with a bond issue or something to make up for lost time.
Yep.
So let's not lose sight of it.
And I'm sorry, one more thing. 2027 seems like a long ways off. It's 3.5 years. And we're going to settle some debt in 2027. We're going to be settling Cumberland debt. We're going to be settling plow truck debt, et cetera. The reason I bring that up is we're likely going to need to bond something
Oh, yeah.
along with going for grants, whether it's the new fire station / town office or the stormwater / Cousins on we're not likely to be able to pay for a lot of this with what we're saving and then grants, but, you know, trying to be that lucky, it's pretty lucky.
Yep. Yep. So,
Be ahead.
I'm sorry, yes, please.
There is one area in the regular budget that's gonna go down by a little bit. I contacted Cumberland County to see where the county taxes were. And because they switched their fiscal years, this year, it's gonna be a little bit more delayed, more into March for kind of the actual warrant being sent to us. But they had a meeting and the gentleman was nice enough to email me after their meeting. And so the county taxes are actually gonna go down by $1,900, so only a small little adjustment.
1,800?
Yeah,
Okay.
minor, but still.
They have in the past gone up significantly.
And that's the last year we jumped from, 171,000 to 216,000, so he did say that we're kind of an exception for where we are. A lot of other locations are just seeing drastic, jumps.
Is that based on valuations?
No, it's, I can. So, yes, no, so he said that, for 2024-25, the overall county of Cumberland tax assessment was around 39 million, an increase of 4.8. The countywide state equalized valuation increase from the prior year was enormous at 17.36. As a result, any community that had a valuation increase greater than 17 will end up with the tax increase higher than 5%. And any community less will be less. So for the town, Shebig, our state equalized valuation increased 4.8 over the prior year, which is less than the 17. And so as a result, our assessment decreased by 0.96%, which is why the jump of $1,900.
I have one more very quick question, if I may, Bob.
Sure.
The dredging amount right now in the Machoya savings is $130,500. We're not expecting the balance to be quite that much, maybe.
So that's correct. I don't know what the balance is gonna be, but,
Do you know when you'll know?
I don't, and I'm getting at the point where I'm gonna follow up with him just to kind of give a little bit of a nudge. Army Corps, yeah, and so there should be a cushion, and I think it should be more than like 5 or 10. I think that it should be, a decent
Yeah.
amount of cash if you wanted to put that towards another.
Yeah, the other issue we don't know about yet relative to dredging is the eelgrass mitigation impact.
Correct.
They kind of hung that out there and said, well, it might be nothing, it might be a lot.
Really?
Yeah,
Yeah.
we still don't,
Somehow I thought it was 80,000, is that not right? Okay.
No.
So we don't know.
We don't know.
We don't know that, and then we also don't know that whole issue with,
This is such a weird.
not Proc, the other ones.
Oh, right.
So,
the settlement of that contract issue, yeah. So,
What do you suggest, Bob? Start, if there's 30,000 left, put it in some sort of an escrow fund?
I think when we came up with that number of $80,000 with the help of Jordan Macy, I believe that was a fat number to finish up the dredging with some money in it for a potential eelgrass impact fee. But it was all a systematic wild arse guess to get to that number. And now we know the dredging is likely to be less. Now we have reason to believe that we might not get hit with any portion of the settlement fee with the prior contractor relative to that whole contracting issue.
You do?
I don't know that, it's still ongoing is the last I know, but I
I
think,
thought in the last conversation, he was somewhat encouraging about that, but no,
I'd have to look back, I can't,
okay.
I mean, I might not have been a part of that last conversation.
I heard a small amount of encouragement. Here's my point. I don't know how you can plan for something that you have no idea. So if there's a small balance left of, 30,000, I'm just making that number up. I would suggest that we ask the taxpayers to put it into the stone wharf account.
Yep, agreed.
Yeah,
And I would say the same thing about any other miscellaneous cleanup of the capital accounts as we go through this. I think the first step is getting the analysis that we're waiting on from the finance committee, which I know Carol's working on with them.
So I do think one thing that would be helpful on that is, so Bill is putting together a schedule of sort of, a replacement cost schedule. So like, we can look out at 2027 and sort of see, because I think we have to remember, we have other things we've got to kind of plan for, the kind of day-to-day things. So, I hope that he can have that done, in the next couple of weeks. If not, maybe we can help him do it. But I think that would be helpful because it's kind of a framework to start from. And then we could add like the stone pier and the fire department, put in just a guesstimate number and start kind of including those. And I think, I also think, a couple of things we should think about on, I feel like I can't really evaluate the impact of the budget until we hear from the school. And, if it was up to me, I'd want to hear from them in January because I feel it's such a big part of the budget, but we don't know where it's going. And, then I think, maybe we could meet with the finance committee in a workshop style format once we have that capital schedule. And they're gonna do a public presentation in April, but I think they could do kind of an internal presentation to us that would be valuable about kind of how our capital's gone over, time, what expenses have increased, what have stayed steady. That's the kind of analysis they've done. So I recommend kind of building into this process. Maybe sometime in March, a presentation, towards the end of March, a presentation from them on the work they've done preliminarily, which would include this capital inventory. And then, when do we hear from the school?
So according to the schedule that we have right now, the joint meeting with the school committee isn't until April 9th.
And we don't get a budget before then?
The week before.
In the past, I would get something, a week or a number of days before, and then I would enter it in and then provide the board with the updated information. And so the way the schedule is right now, next Wednesday, there is a third budget draft. And then April 3rd is the fourth. And then April 9th is the joint meeting. And then May 1st is the final draft for
I
review.
wonder if we could ask for the school budget by our April 3rd meeting, or a little prior, so we can incorporate the numbers. So that we could have kind of a pre-look, because that would be better to me, is to sort of, okay, incorporate that into our budget, what does that mean? And then when we have the joint meeting with the school, we kind of have a more comprehensive place to come from. Like, here's the overall town budget percentage increase. You know, here's the school portion, here's the town portion. And I don't know how the numbers are gonna fall out. Here's some of the things we think we need to do, you know, capitalize. But I think that to me would be more productive. And it seems like asking for it, we're gonna meet with them on the 9th, asking for it in time for our meeting on the 3rd.
We can ask.
Yeah, and I just feel like it's so late in the process and it's.
That's a structural topic that we should cover with them for future budget seasons.
And I think they're talking budget at their next meeting.
Talking
They are.
budget
And,
tonight, yeah.
I talked to Elizabeth Dowdy yesterday.
Okay.
I'm going to go to the school meeting last night, but it's more about superintendent stuff than anything. So she said next Tuesday is going to get back into the budget stuff. And, so I plan to try to attend that meeting myself, just to hear what they're saying and get a feel for it. I don't know when they're going to be able to say our budget is, you know, up X percent. Moving forward, I would encourage the town and the schools to try and work a little closer to have a more matched process. So that one side doesn't finish, and the other one takes another month and a half, and you can't really tell where you're gonna have to tell the taxpayer where it's gonna end up.
Yeah, I guess the way I would look at it, as opposed to getting, this harkens back more to what Carol was saying, as opposed to getting a budget from the school toward the end of the process, and that's the end of it. If we got a tentative budget from the school and integrated it into the overall budget at the same time that we're getting a tentative budget from the departments, then together with the school, we could say, okay, operationally, here's where we are. Is this okay? Or do we feel like we need to work together to find places to trim, whether it's capital for school, capital for town, expenses for town, expenses for school. But if we, right now, it feels like we're in two separate silos and the budget comes over the wall right at the end of the process. And if it looks good, great. If it doesn't look good, yeah, there's a big panic. So
One of the reasons, to my knowledge, why the trio side of the school budget was changed was so that for this reason, it could be kept up with. So as they were getting information, it could be plugged in and you could see the same breakout. And I mean, to this point, unless the information has been requested through the bookkeeper, I haven't had any requests from the school to print out any budget information. So I have no idea where it stands or what format they're using to account.
Right, and I
before and
think
afters.
historically, we did work more in unison and concert, kind of schedule-wise, and we provided a budget to the town. When I was on the school committee, we provided a draft budget in December.
Right.
So I mean, it's not something, I think if we could speed them up a little bit this year to at least, you know, I think it would be valuable to have the budget before the workshop with them. If we can do that and incorporate it into the entire town budget, not just the budget on its own. And so I think that's a worthwhile endeavor. The other things that I think are costs that we need to consider, we haven't really, you know, come to a final decision about the nonprofit organizations. So I think that's something we need to address, at least if we haven't, well, just one, so we need to address that. And then, I think, I think that sort of I don't know how to, I think that kind of understanding what our priorities are in capital and timeframe, which is really a board responsibility. In other words, which projects are the highest priority on the whole list? And, you know, what kind of time frame do we want to implement them in? Because that's not up to the finance committee doing their calculation, that's us.
Yeah.
So,
Going back, so first relative to the rec, Vika compiled all the notes she had and I had about what additional information we wanted from the rec, sent it off to them the next day, and asked them for a specific timeline as to when they could get information back to us. And the answer that came back was, we'll get on this right away. So at some point, we're gonna have to pick a date and say, whatever information we have as of this date, we're gonna make our decision and go forward.
and can you share that request with the rest of the board?
Sure, yeah, yeah, yeah. Secondly, relative to the school conversation, I heard a couple different things. So there's a select board meeting on April 3rd, where we'll be talking about budget. And then there's a joint meeting with the school on April 9th, if I'm not mistaken.
Right.
And what you had asked for earlier, Carol, was if we could have the school budget info in time for the April 3rd meeting. The April 3rd meeting, to have information in time for that, could mean two things. It could mean, can they get it to us April 3rd at noon and somehow Vika manages to get it into Trio? Or do they get it to us by the Thursday before so that Vika has Friday to get it into Trio, and then we can see it sometime for the weekend?
Even earlier, when we're asking for a draft budget, they would hopefully have a draft budget by then, so. I
That's
think-
what I'm getting at. I would ask that we ask our town administrator to ask the school committee for a draft, not a final, but a draft budget by the 27th of March, which is a week before the meeting on the 3rd. And that then we can have both of those budgets compiled to discuss at our meeting on the 3rd. And then in the meeting on the workshop, we have a lot more meaningful conversations in the workshop on the 9th.
That was exactly what I was
Okay.
suggesting.
Does
And
that ring true for you guys too?
It's a reasonable request.
Yeah.
Okay,
You're not asking for a final vote.
correct.
You said March 27th, right?
March 27th, in advance of our April 3rd meeting, yes.
And it can be just a draft. It's not like we're expecting, I mean, that's the whole point. It's just get some numbers in there so we can make some comparisons. But they have, you know, cost of living increases themselves and maybe insurance increases. I don't know. I mean, things that are definitely known.
And then,
If they have it available sooner, we'll take it. It's not, that would be the latest date, but they could certainly provide it before. But Vika, how does it work for you? So they give that to you, you plug it into Trio. And then when they give you an updated budget, what's the mechanism? Do you have to go and manually correct things in Trio?
Yeah, so anytime you make a change, you know, if you decrease it by $1,000, I go into Trio and I just change that number to what it needs to be, and then save it, and it does its thing. And that's why I'm saying with the school, I haven't plugged anything in, but I also, I haven't been asked to provide anything. So I'm guessing that they're working off of the same Excel spreadsheet that they have in the past.
Hey, Bob, would you mind if I address something specifically on the capital plan?
please do.
I was listening to Herb speak when he was here last week about road paving, and I don't disagree with what he said. He said that the lifespan of most paved roads are 15 to 22 years, something like that. Here's where I'm sort of thinking about the present and moving forward to the future. And I realize that Vika is the road commissioner, and I won't leave her out of this process, but I'm speaking so that she can hear me say that. I'm thinking that short term, one of us, and I'm offering to do this, should make a call to a guy named Ron Simbari of All States Asphalt, and see if he and or his new road foreman could pay a field visit to Shabig and look at our roads that we put down, look at what we have remaining, and look at the stretch one more time, South Road from Roy Hill to the end, and try to figure out short term what we should do or not with the existing draft contract. Moving way forward of that plan for the future, and I'll speak with the finance group about I think maybe there's a way to plan for the future where you don't have to completely resurface the entire road. You might be able to do like a double chip seal on some of it later on. And my point is, how much would that be worth planning for financially? See what I mean? From one,
It's another piece of equipment. It just
from
happens
one
to be-
to help start some of that, if you, I don't think you mind if I start some of that.
That'd be great if you could.
Right, and I will keep you in the loop with Ron as far as the email. I'll probably also include at least you. I might include the entire board if you don't mind. That way you can see what we're talking about. They're hard to get a hold of, they're hard to gauge.
Oh, and especially now.
Yeah,
Wasn't there a new contact,
There is a new gentleman by the name of Sam that's taking over.
oh, really?
Yeah.
You have the name?
yeah, I'll forward it to you, because he gave us a quote for the stone pier. And they need to be responsible,
Yeah, that quote came through really quickly.
and huge though, and I hope it was inflated for our benefit, I think it was.
One could hope.
Not like a hot toss.
Yeah, it was, how much you paid.
So I think, Vicky, you mentioned, I don't have my budget schedule right in front of me.
I get it.
Thank you. So our meeting on the 6th. Our next meeting, which is a week
Next
from
week.
today,
Yeah.
is intended to be the third draft of the budget. And I know we're in a little bit of a weird place because we missed that one day, and this meeting is sort of a follow-on to the makeup of that one day. I'm wondering what we really have to talk about in that third. We're not making many changes tonight. We're not gonna know a lot about revenue, and we're probably not gonna know a lot more about capital. So should we really be having our third budget review on March 6th? Or should we reserve that meeting time for more pressing matters? Because you see much change that can be implemented between now and next week.
I don't.
David, Mark?
This is, the question is, what do we need to accomplish in that meeting?
Right, exactly. So if it's okay with you guys,
I'm feeling we're pretty close, right?
yeah, it
I mean,
depends on what
how
happens.
to get information.
We're as close as we can get for right now. We may have a lot more work to do.
Well, that's the way I'm looking.
So maybe Vika and I could sit down and take a shot at redrafting the budget schedule in light of what we know now about when we might see capital, and in light of what we hope to find out about when we might see a draft of the school budget. Carol?
So I'm wondering if we could instead work in, and I think it would have to be towards the end of March, some kind of workshop with the finance committee. It's kind of a pre-presentation of their later presentation, but I think giving them a date certain would be helpful to kind of make sure things get done like for everybody.
Do you want to adjourn a regular,
Honestly, Courtney, I don't even know when she'll be back. She's been, sitting in.
She's back this
She's
week.
maybe back, but I mean, I would connect with her, I would connect with all three of them and just ask them, her could probably spearhead the thing, but. And I don't mean that they have to have things kind of final in terms of presentation quality, but I think it would be beneficial to just go over what they've done so far. Especially the capital inventory.
And Mark, you said,
Sometime in late March, I think would be the optimal time, because it will be before we meet with the schools, so we'll maybe have a better context of thinking about capital.
we can get them in on that March 30th. It's a regular scheduled meeting. That's the meeting
Oh,
before the April 3rd, where it's a budget. And that might, so if you don't have another discussion for the budget right now, for next week. The following meeting is the second meeting in March.
Yep.
And then that next meeting is the first meeting in April where it's a budget workshop.
So I think in other words, have them come to the March 3rd. I think March 30th is a good.
So you could ideally move the third draft instead of the 6th, move it to the 20th, and then have a discussion if they're able to come. And then if we have anything that staggers between now and then, incorporate that into it.
Are you saying March 20th?
March 20th.
Yeah.
Oh, I think it's the 30th, okay,
Yeah,
gotcha, yeah, March 20th.
So move the third draft to March 20th instead of the 6th.
Yeah.
And I'm sorry,
And then capital when? The capital conversation when, or is that the third draft?
So
Same time.
the way I look at it is once you get into your second and third and fourth draft, you're really covering the whole budget. So, cause like Mark said, I think, there's gonna be little things here and there for the departments that might change, but it's not gonna have a drastic impact. So if you wanna, plan for the March 20th discussion, if the, committee is able to attend, and then maybe give the rec center the deadline that we need to have that information from them so that it's being able to discuss at that meeting.
Yeah.
So then you can make that decision. And that's incorporated before the next meeting with the school
Yeah,
information.
that seems like a good process.
what is the goal of meeting with the finance committee? What was the goal with that meeting?
So the goal of that meeting is for them to give us just the background on kind of how we've managed our finances over the past 15 years, which I think even though we've all been here, it's good to kind of evaluate there were some surprises to me. And then that would give Bill a certain date that he's got to finish this capital inventory by. And I'm certain the other committee members will help him if he's too busy. I think asking them to provide that by that date, I think that would be a useful document for us. And I don't know I haven't seen it myself, so, then Vika should look it over in the department, make sure nothing's missing. I think you gave them most of the input information, right? I mean, it came out of the audit and it
It
came
came out of the audit and then the assets.
the depreciation schedule.
yeah.
And then I think it's our job to add some of these projects that are to be determined, so here, our department, and there may be others, I don't know.
Yeah. Vika's point about small changes in the budget, not really moving the needle is a good one. You can cut 5,000 here, 10,000 there, even 20,000 there. Until you get up around $100,000, you don't really see much of a movement in the.
We've seen something on the right side of the points.
I never mean to minimize it, you shouldn't trim
No.
things that need to be trimmed, that's not what my point is. My point is, I think we've gotten stuck in the minutia in the past
Yep.
of doing that and not focusing enough on the actual bigger picture sometimes.
Yep.
And it's easy to do.
For sure. So we'll come up with a new budget schedule with these ideas worked in. Who's gonna talk to her? Is that?
I'll talk to her, and even if the committee can't make it, he can make it, I think it's worth it, even if it's preliminary. I think asking Bill to have that done before that date, so we can have it.
So it needs to be done by 3:15 in order to be in the packet.
So that's a good, it's 2 weeks.
Yep.
Okay.
March 15th for the packet.
Tax day.
Again, that should be considered a draft. though.
Right, and that's great, because we might have some
Sure,
suggestions. changes.
exactly.
And I think, if for some reason they have conflicts, they can't make it, then I think Herb will be able to make it guaranteed, so even if he's the only one, it's okay.
Some sort of look at the draft, just so we know what they're doing.
Right, and then they have a presentation, I don't know if they've shared the date with you, but I believe it's the end of April, is a public presentation on kind of the same thing, so I think we should see it sooner rather than later.
Yeah, I suspect the public presentation in late April will also rely heavily on the part that Herb's been working on, which is here's what we think a finance committee should be doing in the future, part of the whole picture.
Which this committee, this board should weigh in on.
Absolutely, yeah. And then Vika, are you gonna talk to either the superintendent or,
I'll email the
chair.
and the superintendent.
and see if we can get a draft by then so that we can be more, so that we can all be more prepared for a substantive discussion
Yeah.
on
Just
April.
anything they have to date too, if we can get that in our system.
Okay,
I have a question for Vika, which is somewhat, it's a topic area, but in the past, sort of both sides, if we're hiring a town administrator or a superintendent, oftentimes the other entity would have a representative on the interview committee. I think it would be great if you could be on the superintendent interview committee, because there's a lot of financial issues. You know, that to me is a primary responsibility, and we've had some challenges lately. And so I think it would be helpful to have you in the room, you know, hearing the experience, asking questions. I can't imagine the school committee would have a problem with that. We've definitely done it in the past.
but would it be more comfortable for you to ask them that, or would you like me to ask them that?
I think it would be weird of me asking them. Yeah, I
So
think
we
that
can
if you can have the conversation with them, if that's how the board feels, that I'm happy to do
Well,
that.
how do other people feel?
I think it's a good idea, and I think she's right, I think the chair should ask.
Yeah.
And whether you ask the chair or whether you ask, yeah.
You know, if it can be a non-voting position, it's really more to kind of get, you know, it's up to them. They can let you weigh in or not. I think just being there will be helpful.
I have heard that they're looking towards somebody who has finance experience.
Yeah.
But that's,
I think it's coming up pretty soon. I think they have 3 candidates that can interview.
All right,
Bob, can I?
yes, sir.
So the one page I printed out of the draft budget was page 35. And I think the work that the town does on the capital side is fantastic. And the reserves are set up. So what I don't see on page 35 is what the reserve amounts are.
Right.
Okay, but that's fine, I don't need to see that. But one of the line items is the Indian Point retaining wall. And if there's reserve money there, I don't know where we stand on that whole subject, but do we need that money at all? And can that be freed up?
So the
as part
title of
this
that,
budget?
I believe the title of that line was officially changed at town meeting last year, is that correct?
that is correct. Last year, it was changed to Indian Island, and the description that was approved by the taxpayer was that it was Indian Point Public Access Planning and Implementing. I can't promise that the one that we're discussing today is on it, but on the website, we have under treasurer, the different fiscal years of budgets, and we've been uploading any information in there.
So the 2025 budget information is under that.
We just created the under treasurer, all the previous year, all the audits, all the information is in there. And so I don't remember between last Wednesday's meeting, Saturday's meeting, and today's meeting, I can't promise that I put today's in there, but there is, if you go under town departments, under treasurer, previous years,
Okay,
budgets, audited statements, it's in there, and so as we have these meetings, I just upload any documentation, and so if it's not there now, which it probably isn't, what you'll see up there will be a full statement of all the reserve accounts, what the status is, and things like that, so.
okay. Well, the question there was, I don't know how much money is there,
Right,
but do we anticipate we need that amount of money?
correct. So
Given the total.
the answer is we probably will not need all of it. We probably will need some of it. We're in conversations with the Indian Island Corporation and also the specific landowners around the top of the old access road about formalizing and improving the parking situation there in the interest of their convenience, but certainly in the interest of public safety. we have, a couple of us have some assignments to do some calculations as to how many yards of fill we're gonna need to improve that parking area. And the cost of that fill and the labor to build, basically some parallel parking along the road, that gets the cars off the road is what we're talking about. And the last thing I wanted to mention to you was, because the accounts are held, the money that's in the capital accounts is held at Machias Savings. That's a separate piece of paper for us, and Trio, our operating accounting and finance software, does not have any place to load those balances into Trio. So we do that manually when we're building. We typically, for planning purposes, take the Trio information into an Excel spreadsheet and then just add a column, put the balances in so we can see it. And happy to show you that document if you'd like to take a look at
Do
it.
you want the bank statement so you can see all of them?
No, I don't need that. I was just wondering, is there $40,000 that we don't need there
Right.
Right,
that
there may
you
be,
don't need a tax,
right,
put it in the tax base for 2024 or 2025? So then the other comment was you thought it was a good discussion in the Saturday meeting about, we got two big projects, the Stone Pier and new town offices firing.
Right.
And if we bond those
Yep.
at some point in time, what's that annual cost going to be?
Right.
And should we think about putting that annual cost in these reserve numbers now and start putting that money away?
Yeah.
And I thought that was right on the money, and I don't know what those numbers would be, but I didn't do the calculation.
Well, the other piece.
We ought to do that.
The other piece of that equation is how much money can we get from any sort of public funding for those two projects?
Yeah, so you gotta make an estimate, this is $15 million project, and we're gonna have to pay 3, and we're gonna bond it for X number of years.
We're trying
And
to.
what's that bond payment? And if we start putting that money away now, then we're ahead of the game.
right, and so I think the finance committee's first task was to take our existing assets and work out a schedule, you know, because they all have to be, like, there's a fire truck replacement and other things. Then the goal would be, and I think we can do this by the 20th, it would be to work in these projects, you know, as sort of a separate, these are projects that are coming down the pike. And what I did with I just did it on my own. I went through and did some scenarios. Okay, we have a $15 million Stone Pier project. What if we bond half of it? What if we bond 30%?
Right.
What does that look like annually? And right now, as Vika said a while back, money is pretty expensive.
Yeah.
So like borrowing money, you add up not only, you know, the interest and the principal in the end, it's like, wow. So I think demonstrating that to the community so they understand way better to kind of put it away as capital than to borrow it.
Right.
But we're gonna have to borrow some, probably. But I think that is something I think the finance committee might be able to present at the public meeting.
Mhm.
So that's where we're headed.
Good.
But it's also mostly in a spreadsheet format where we're not creating a report narrative. It's because I don't think that's necessary at this point. So,
Mark, you had something?
Just quickly, smaller scale operationally, we can see that the transfer station is starting to creep away from us. It isn't surprising. At some point, I would like Vika to consider having a discussion with her newest and her oldest transfer station attendants about when they would like to see us consider a workshop to talk about how that
Good idea.
facility operates, talk about policies, talk about pricing. They've already approved some signage up there, so on and so forth. So, you know, do they have an idea? They'd like a workshop before, you know, May or end of April.
I think the best answer for that is the sooner the better.
yeah, Jeff said that to me.
I think so.
So I think if we could find time to do that, I think it would be great, but I think, yeah, I mean, I said it to people, I think it looks great up there. And, you know, it's a difficult space to manage, and I think they're doing, you know, a good job.
And Jeff is very helpful. He takes the stuff out of it.
Doesn't do that for me. So John, the last piece of it, we are reaching out to congressional offices to try to get on top of an organized approach to asking for money.
Yeah, I heard that kind of last Saturday. That's good.
And we've made an initial contact. We've been referred to one person who works actually for that committee on behalf of Collins. And we've reached out to that person, haven't heard back from them yet, so.
And one thing I didn't realize was the allocations from last year still have not been released because they haven't approved the budget and now we're looking at
Well-
a potential shutdown. So I hadn't thought about that, but they, you know, even the last years are still hung up in
Yeah, a big part of the conversation 2 days ago with the first congressional staffer was what happens with CRs, which CR will actually lead to the release of those monies so that they can then start talking about the next round.
Right, and so on one that I'm aware of, they did say it's involved, so they know that theirs is gonna happen no matter which one gets, if something gets approved. But some of them may get waylaid.
Yep.
So anyway, that's been a challenge, so I think with that, it's kind of a mess right now.
Yeah.
There are also, I think, there are some other, the governor's put a lot more money into this infrastructure, fund, 50 million, and I think, I mean, Bob and I are working with Weston and Sampson, but I kind of want to light a fire under them to kind of get to the point where we can start applying, because, I don't think this, you know, situation will be favorable forever.
No, for sure. Yeah.
No, we're gonna need something to show the public.
Right, I think they're getting, I still want to show us, I mean, I feel like I beat my head against the wall a little bit.
Yeah.
So that's another meeting you're gonna schedule, will be them and the select board at some point?
Yes, and first, we have to make sure that what they bring to that meeting is what we want them to bring to that meeting, to the information you sent me. It's not just what are the results of the bathymetry work that was just done last week, but rather, how does that bathymetry work inform that SLR analysis and information that we need with which to make a decision as to what our scenario is, that then lets us go forward with the design and talk to the golf course and all that kind of stuff, so.
Yeah, you might also be interested to know that there are discussions from some others, not so much from me, with DOT about the Cousins Island parking lot elevation problem, and the Yarmouth Wharf study is complete, the engineering study, and the talk with Yarmouth about the outcome of that.
Right.
And long term, if we keep landing at Cousins Island Wharf and turnaround, there's going to be, have to be some elevation considerations there, so. But trying.
So with that, anything else for tonight's review of the second draft? I think we've all got some assignments to work on, mostly Mika. And we will change next week's meeting to a full agenda as opposed to a focus on budget. And I'll work with Mika tomorrow morning to start putting that budget, put that agenda together and get it out to everybody.
Are you ready for a motion for our next executive session?
Yeah, I think we need to adjourn this workshop and then do the motion, or we switch straight into executive session.
Yep, so,
Yeah.
yeah.
I'll move to go into executive session pursuant to 456A personnel.
Motion by Mark, second by Carol, all in favor? It is 7:18 PM.
Thank you for coming.
Thank you, John. Thank you. Yeah.
Hold on.
Yeah.